What's up, everybody? Nate here. And once again, we have to talk about student loans because Joe Biden and the federal government finally made a decision on canceling a large portion of federal student loan debt. As of today, 9 million student loan borrowers have now had their loans completely wiped off of the face of the earth because of this brand new executive order for President Joe Biden. So today, I want to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly from this executive order. I want to talk about what this is going to mean for not only our economy in the future, but student loans in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into things. So we have talked a lot about this on this channel before, but basically as soon as President Joe Biden became president all the way back in 2020, many groups have been pushing him to cancel a large portion of student loan debt. Mainly, a lot of people have been looking for him to cancel around $50,000 or so for everyone that has federal student loans. That would basically eliminate around 80 to 90% of all of the student loan debt in the United States. As of today, though, President Joe Biden just made a huge stride towards that, although not as big as a lot of people would have hoped for. Officially, $10,000 are now going to be knocked off of every single person that has federal student loan debt. And if you've taken out any Pell Grants, well, you are going to get $20,000 completely off. So the federal government has had a pretty big sale today. This forgiveness is a little bit smaller than anticipated. It's only for those making $125,000 a year or less, or combined with a spouse of $250,000. So it's not exactly for every single person, but it's for the vast majority of Americans. And like I said before, 9 million Americans now just had their federal student loans completely wiped out and forgiven. And there is some other things that this new executive order does, like it caps the amount that you can pay on your federal student loans by 5% based on your monthly income. So you don't have to pay any more than 5% of your monthly income on federal student loans. In addition, this new executive order extends the pause on all federal student loan payments until December 31st of 2022. And up to this point, President Joe Biden and his administration have already forgiven billions of dollars in federal student loan debt. This is just the biggest and most general option that they've made in 2022. I want to start with the positive things that come from the student debt forgiveness. So there is a lot of stigma around student debt forgiveness. Some people are adamantly against it, and some people are definitely for it. And we'll get into kind of both sides in a minute here, but I want to start with the potential positives. Now, I have a personal connection to the student loan debt forgiveness story because, well, I'm going to be honest with you, I have thousands of dollars in student debt. And I think that there's a lot of millennials out there, Gen Z, Gen X, and generations just in general, who went to school and were taught that they needed to get that college degree and that secondary education, but it really isn't paying off today. Now, say what you want, there's a lot of different degrees and career paths that people have taken that, well, there just isn't a lot of money down that road to begin with. But my parents basically taught me, and a lot of millennials were basically taught that it didn't really matter what career you went into, you just needed that college degree. So a lot of people weren't really thinking of college in terms of dollars and how much they're actually going to make. A lot of people just wanted a career that was going to be able to afford them their basic standard of living. And being taught that growing up, I went to school and, well, a lot of us didn't really have enough money in order to, well, go to school. So we needed to take out loans. Our parents didn't really make enough, and that's part of the reason why they wanted us to go to college in the first place, so that we could eventually get a job that hopefully paid us a whole lot of money with that college degree. They didn't have college degrees. My parents didn't have a college degree, so they wanted me to get one so that I could make more than them and hopefully be in a better financial situation. Now, canceling a lot of this student debt does just that. It kind of forces Americans into a situation where now they're not suffocated by debt. Millennials have so much student debt, it's one of their biggest financial worries. They don't really know how they're going to pay it off because they've taken out thousands upon thousands of dollars in debt. And my little college that I went to in Michigan didn't really cost that much, but for some people, they were taking out $30,000, $40,000, and even $100,000 in student loan debt for their 4-year undergraduate degrees. So now a lot of Americans don't have to worry about that because $10,000 or more is getting wiped away, so they can now allocate these extra funds towards anything else they want in life, whether it's for basic goods and services or for travel or for their their housing, they now have the ability to take hundreds of dollars every month and put it back into the economy. And for the long term of the United States, that's a pretty good thing. And we also have to consider the idea that the United States right now, I'm talking about in 2022, is at a really strange spot because we have a lot of recession fears because of the Federal Reserve and debt growing and of course inflation. So what this allows a lot of Americans to do, particularly the millennials who are in their biggest days for working and gaining money, well, now they can now take a lot of these funds and put it back into the economy instead of back into the federal government, where that only helps the federal government pay for a lot of its other programs. That could help us to stay out of a recession in the short term because a lot of Americans are now taking these extra funds that they would have been spending on student loans and buying other things with them. So while the federal government and the Federal Reserve come up with a better monetary strategy, we are all going to be spending. But unfortunately, that's kind of where the good parts of this go. It's going to be really positive in the short term because there's gonna be a lot more spending in the United States, but more spending is definitely not what we need right now in terms of inflation. The United States is facing an inflation problem, and it's at an over 40-year high right now of around 8.5%, which means the price of goods and services is going up year over year by 8.5% on average. Americans now need a whole lot more money in order to buy things, and like I said, in the short term, they're now going to have that money, but in the long term, prices are going to go up because people are buying more than what they were before. This is exactly what happened over the last couple of years. We had the pandemic, economic lockdowns, and people were out of work. Unemployment almost hit around 15%. Right now, it's at around 3.5%. So people are really employed and they have lots of money. But back then, people didn't really have money. So we weren't sure what was going to happen with the economy. And because the economy wasn't really moving, the federal government decided to step in and provide trillions of dollars in stimulus. And the Federal Reserve printed a whole bunch more money, and they stimulated Wall Street and lowered their benchmark interest rate. So now there's a whole bunch of money circulating around. And what that means is spending goes way up. People went out and spent money. Businesses didn't really have the supply to meet that, so they had to go out and hire more people, create more factories, and we had a bunch of supply chain issues, a lot of which we're still facing today. So prices have naturally gone up because of that. And now with people spending even more money, it's almost like an additional stimulus check that the federal government is giving out. Not only that, but if we look at this from an individual financial standpoint, a lot of Americans are going to have a lot less debt, but because they can now cap their payments at an income level of 5% of all of their monthly income, well, that means that they're going to be paying a lot less of this debt every single month. They're going to have a lot more money to spend on other things, and in today's economy, that's a good thing, but in the long term, that's a bad thing because of things like inflation, our GDP, and taxes. So overall, Americans are going to have a lot more money, but they're also going to be in debt for a whole lot longer. Student loans are a huge problem for millennials, and 9 million Americans are going to have their student loan debt completely wiped out. Now, those Americans are going to be able to spend like crazy because they have all of this extra income, but there's still a good portion of Americans that, well, they're going to continue to have student loan debt, and that student loan debt is still going to be keeping them down. That's why a lot of groups have been pushing Biden to just cancel all of it, so that way every single American has all of this extra money and a lot less debt. I just feel like this debt is really going to continue to hurt Americans in the long term, and they're just pushing it off instead of really focusing on trying to pay it down. Now you're going to have a whole bunch of money to buy other things, and that's great. You can get those fancy cars and all of those Gucci bags, but at the end of the day, this debt is keeping you from building wealth. That needs to be your focus. You have to pay down these student loans, even if it only ends up being a couple $100s a month. That couple $100, well, while inflation goes up later and taxes rise and all of these different things, that's going to eventually hurt you again. So you gotta focus on that. And this bill doesn't really address the systematic problems that we have with student loans in the first place, because like I said, my entire generation and generations before me were told that they need to go to school, but a lot of them couldn't afford it. So the federal government decided to come in and provide every single American with federal student loans. That way you could get that college degree. That way we had a more educated workforce. And you got to remember, this is is before a time when the internet was extremely explosive. I couldn't really go on the internet as a kid and learn the things that I can today. YouTube wasn't as big, blogging wasn't really as big, so there wasn't as much information. Education wasn't as democratized as it is today, so we really needed that in the early 2000s. You had to go to school in order to learn the things to better the United States and better your education. But today you don't really need, in a lot of cases, to do that in order to get a really good job or to have a career. So I think in the future it won't be as big of an issue, because I think we're going to continue to see college undergraduate admission go down, and we've definitely seen this over the last 20 years or so. People are not going to those colleges and universities as much as they did in the past, so they're not gathering student loans. And in a lot of cases, you can go to a trade school or you can learn things online, and you don't have to go to that school anymore. But for the people that do go to school, well, they're still going to be collecting student loans in the same exact way. And there's some careers where you have to go to school, like to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. You have to go to school because you have to be able to prove a lot of those really technical skills. So for all of them, they're still basically screwed. They're gonna continue to have to go to school and gather hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and well, this just kicks the problem down the road for another generation. And not only that, there's another impact to inflation here, because obviously the federal government is not going to be collecting a lot of the money that it gave out for these loans for people to go to school. So a lot of these colleges and universities already got paid. That money is out there in circulation. So this bill essentially is going to cost the federal government between $220 and $300 billion. This is on top of a lot of the other bills that President Joe Biden and the federal government have already passed over the last couple of years, like stimulus and the infrastructure program and the newly passed Inflation Reduction Act. We are talking trillions of dollars that now needs to be printed, or they have to find the means in order to get this cash. And that's where you have to kind of read between the lines, because the federal government doesn't want inflation to go up, but what they've also started to do is expand the IRS and the IRS protocols for collecting taxes. This was something that was done in the Inflation Reduction Act, but the IRS is going to have 87,000 new employees within the next 10 years, and those 87,000 employees are going to have a lot more oversight on collecting taxes, and the federal government is going to have to get a lot more creative. So my worry here is that all of the money that people are ultimately saving from having their student loans forgiven 3, 4, and 5 years from now, all of that money is just going to go back to the federal government, because they're going to tax new and different things like your income. And they kind of have to do this, because if they don't, then well, they're just going to have to print a whole bunch of money, and printing billions upon billions of dollars like that just contributes to inflation. So remember, if the United States federal government is nonprofit, the only way that they can get money is if, one, they print it, or two, they collect more taxes. And right now they have a big deficit, so they're gonna just have to collect more taxes. And who pays that? Well, you do. So at the end of the day, this new executive order does a lot of things to expand our GDP growth in the United States, because a lot of Americans are now going to have additional funds that they can take from not paying their student loans to buying a whole slew of other things. But our GDP growth is not the most important thing. I mean, I guess it is on the world stage, but for individual Americans, they need to be worried about taxes starting to rise and also inflation. And I can almost guarantee you that those two things are going to be a direct result of this executive order. Those things are going to go up. That means you need a lot more money, and in this economy, your job is still not really the best way to do that. And having a lot of student loan debt that you just kick down the road and not pay till December 31st of this year, or only pay a small amount every single month, well, that's just going to keep you in debt, and it's going to prevent you from saving your money and investing. Both of those things you need in order to build wealth. And I can guarantee you that this issue is not going away anytime soon. This entire executive order simply just kicks the problem down the road to the next administration, and now it kind of leaves it into the hands of the people to decide what they want to do next with their federal student loan. So we will definitely be discussing this and talking about colleges and university, and more importantly, student loans in the future. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about President Joe Biden's executive order on student debt forgiveness? Do you think that this is going to ultimately help our economy in the future, or do you think that the cons cons definitely outweigh the pros. Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out updates 7 days a week over here on this channel, and I've actually got another one ready for you right here, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.